Okay, we're looking here at lead in the environment, and I'm just having a look at this article from the newspaper. It was from the Sydney Morning Herald Online, November the 5th, 2012, and it was called Lead Standard for Children Too High, in inverted commas, by Amy Corduroy. I'll just have a look at it because it's got some interesting points in it, because I'm interested in lead and, pollution and everything. Lead standard for children too high. Up to 100,000 young Australian children could have dangerously high lead levels in their blood, leading health experts believe. Parents doing home renovations on pre-1970s houses covered in toxic lead paint could be unwittingly putting their children at risk, while doctors are relying on obsolete guidelines that allow dangerously high levels of lead in the blood. Toxic lead paint. Well, if you live in any big city on Earth, any big city, whether it be Sydney, London, anywhere, New York, there's going to be lead in the ground. I mean, lead paint was around, for a whole century or more. I don't know how long lead paint was around, for a very long time, and it's toxic. And all those old buildings, if it wasn't scraped into the soil by paint scraping, it would have been washed into the soil. Any building anywhere in a big city is going to be surrounded by soil into which particles of lead paint fell. Doesn't matter where you are, that old lead paint is flaked into the soil. Just looking at a few notes here that I've made. So if you're growing vegetables in a London allotment or in a backyard in Paddington in Sydney, if you think, oh, how healthy, I'm growing my own vegetables, they're probably growing in lead-contaminated soil. They probably are. If you're in a London allotment, you should get that soil tested for lead, because 10 to 1, 10 to 1 it's likely that there's lead in the soil, and mercury as well. You should have your soil tested for mercury because now, for example, our house in my country town that I came from, my father put all red lead on the brickwork, and red lead isn't lead at all. I think red lead, you'll have to check it out on Wikipedia or somewhere. I think red lead is mercury, and my father gives bricks that letterbox red look. And my father painted all the bricks around our house in that red lead, and all that mercury would have been washed into the soil by now. It was never scraped off. It would have flaked off by itself, and that mercury would still be in that soil. So wherever you are on Earth, if you're in a city, you should be checking out for lead and mercury levels around your house and your home. And if you're going to eat vegetables in a place like Paddington or Surrey Hills in Sydney, well, really, you should think twice, because there's bound to be lead in the soil. Children living in suburbs with high concentrations of pre-1970s houses are particularly at risk of lead poisoning, the researchers say. Yes, I knew some people, when I was nursing 40 years ago, I knew some people who came from Broken Hill, and they were retarded. Now, Broken Hill is a big mining town with silver mining, silver, lead and zinc, and molybdenum, and stuff like that. So you've got all those heavy metals, and some people from Broken Hill are definitely retarded. Children can be exposed to enormously high lead levels in mining towns. In a letter published in the Medical Journal of Australia, they claim 100,000 children aged up to 4 could have lead levels in their blood, putting them at risk of behavior problems and lowered IQ. My father, he shouldn't have done this. He used to wash his hands in petrol. Well, when he'd been working on the car, he'd wash his hands in petrol afterwards if he didn't have any kerosene. That's bad enough, but there was lead in that petrol, and he used to use that to wash our hands with too. He'd wipe our hands with a petroly cloth if we'd been helping him on the car to get all the oil and grease off our hands. Bad practice. Co-author Mark Taylor, a professor of environmental science at Macquarie University, said houses in inner cities were riddled with lead. Yes, they would be riddled with lead. I was researching private schools a few years ago, and when I was reading about the private school at Winchester Cathedral in London, now there's a herb garden at Winchester Cathedral, and the herbs can't be sold. Why can't the herbs at Winchester Cathedral be sold? Because they're toxic. They're full of so much lead that they're poison. They will poison you, the herbs at Winchester Cathedral Herb Garden, so they're not allowed to be sold. Now, what would the reason for that be? Would it have been the lead light? There's a huge amount of lead light, and there'd be lead on the roof at Winchester Cathedral. However, how did it all get into the soil? I mean, is Winchester Cathedral painted, or was the lead washed into the soil off the roof? Because they would have had all lead on the roof. There's all lead light around the glasswork. Somehow, all that lead got into the garden at Winchester Cathedral. And it wouldn't even be a painted building. It's probably a stone building, wouldn't it be? So all that lead from the roof and somehow got into that garden and at that school. There's a high school there at Winchester Cathedral, as I recall, riddled with lead. He said scientists had only discovered even low levels were linked to dangerous health outcomes as levels in the community decreased. Australia's peak health body, the National Health and Medical Research Council, currently recommends Australians have blood levels below 10 micrograms per deciliter of blood. But Professor Taylor said earlier this year the US National Toxicology Program had released a review finding lead levels half as high caused a decreased academic achievement, IQ and cognitive measures, as well as increased incidence of attention-related and problem behaviors. Yes, I think some people with mood swings and that might have been contaminated. Well, lead poisoned as children. I mean, lead poisoning doesn't only make you retarded, it can sort of make you badly behaved and everything. While such changes could be small enough to not be immediately identifiable by doctors, spread across the population, they could have a massive effect. 1 million kids losing 1 million IQ points. That's a lot of IQ down the drain, he said. Yes, if you look at it mathematically that way, it is. That's why alcohol is bad. Think of all the brain cells that are washed down the drain every night. How many IQ points are going down the drain because of people boozing their lives away or drugging their lives away? The review also found some evidence of decreased kidney function and delayed puberty in children under 12. Professor Taylor's co-author Chris Winder, a professor of toxicology and occupational health at the Australian Catholic University, said the council was taking too long to review the evidence and set new standards for blood lead levels. The evidence is overwhelming, and the NHMRC, that's the National Health and whatever Research Council and Medical Research Council, should roll up their sleeves and do something rather than having this long, ponderous process, Professor Winder said. There are no reliable, up-to-date studies of Australians' lead levels. To estimate them, the group used US rates of blood lead levels above 5 micrograms per deciliter and applied them to the Australian population. Professor Winder, I suppose it could be Winder, Professor Winder said it was not possible to define exactly how and why children get exposed to lead, as it could occur in many ways, including contaminated dust, soil, or house paint. Well, it's my contention that the house paint is either flaked into the soil when it's being repainted, or people do have a tendency to scrape before they paint, don't they? Or it was washed into the soil or blistered off by sun and just blistered off. I think it gets into the soil that way. And, it's possible you eat the vegetables that are grown in your backyard, isn't it? Elizabeth O'Brien, the founder of... yes, what did I say about soil? Yes, I said if you're living in the inner city, you should just basically, if you're in a terrace house in Paddington, you should basically take, inner Sydney, you should basically take all your soil away. You should just take all the soil away and then bring in new soil, bring in new uncontaminated soil. If you're really going to feed your children vegetables that were grown and all that, take it all away and start again. And of course, using an iron wok helps. Well, no stainless steel, no enameled cast iron. If you use an iron wok to do your cookery, or copper cookware like a copper frying pan or a copper kettle too, the body always takes up copper and iron before it takes up lead. So if you want to reduce the lead intake into your system, you should use copper or iron. Yes. So we wouldn't use enameled cast iron because the iron couldn't get through the glaze of the enamel into your food, could it? And I don't know if stainless steel is the same, but if you have an iron wok, you'll notice the wok will go rusty. Or a cast iron frying pan that isn't enameled, it'll go rusty too. So you're going to get some iron into your food or some copper into your food that way. I did learn that on television once. I learn a lot of things on television, don't I? Yes. Elizabeth O'Brien, the founder of advocacy organisation the Lead Group, said it was only in 2010 that adding lead to paint was completely banned. Why so late? Why only 2010? Why only 2 years ago was it completely banned? It should have been banned a long time ago. There's lead in the environment. It's got to be, well, it's there now, but we shouldn't be adding more. She said a national study of exposure levels was urgently needed. We can only guess how many children and adults are suffering from high blood lead levels that are impacting on their health, Ms. O'Brien said. She said parents and doctors were often unaware of the problem and did not think to test for it. Yes, if you've got children, you should have your soil tested for lead and for mercury. A spokesman for the National Health and Medical Research Council said it was never intended that the goal of 10 micrograms be interpreted as a safe level of exposure, safe in inverted commas. Having said that, the statement and its supporting evidence is currently under review, and all children should have their exposure to lead minimized, he said. Yes, there's so much lead in the environment just from cars, isn't it? They've got lead-free petrol, but if you're living in the city, you're going to ingest lead just from all that car exhaust, or you would have been. Anyway, so I advise people, if they're growing vegetables in the inner city or somewhere, that they should have their soil tested for lead and mercury. I think there are places to do it, and it doesn't cost that much. You can find out online where to get it tested. All you have to do is dig up some dirt and put it in a plastic bag and take it along to have it tested. Yes, we don't want children to be subject to lead poison, do we? We don't. We don't want them losing any IQ points either. See ya.